Ramona. How you doing?
Hello, doing good.
That's great. Hey, thanks for coming on the show today. And I think that one of the things that I really think when I think of you is like obviously the energy and all of that other stuff, but I'd really like to hear a little bit about your story today, and also just sort of like hear some about your experiences as an SDR manager and give some guidance to the people who are listening to this call. So I guess let's just opening things up. Would you mind just telling me a little bit about your story and a little bit just like personal, but mostly professional? So it's like, tell me about like how you rose up to get in the position that you're in today.
Yeah. So my story is a little bit, probably a little different. I think a lot of times you see SDR managers who are much younger than I am, and I'm okay with that. I got back into the business world after my youngest child got back into school or went into school. So he's now 13. So I'm guessing that was about 8 years ago. And I'd been in sales before. I'd been in sales for a company called ADT Security. Some of y'all might have had security systems in your home and so you're familiar with that company. Did really well when I was there, but it wasn't a tech company that I was working at. It's just basically something for the house. I was working with consumers, not B2B space. So when Luke started school, I basically was ready to get back into the work world, or the business world, I should say, because being a stay-at-home mom is definitely work.
It is.
Yeah. And at that point, I had a lot of friends who told me I should, get into the tech space. And so that's where I started looking, and I started at an EDU company. It was a STEM-centered company. And I was basically working in an inside sales role. So I had to do, and it was like the full funnel. So I had to do the prospecting. I took them, we had a demo that was done by specific engineers. And so I didn't run the demo or anything like that. We would take them, I'd basically set up that meeting, then they'd come back to me, and then I would close them. And through that process, I was able to learn a lot. I learned one of the key things that I'm super great at is just starting to engage with folks, figuring out how to hook them, and then how to build rapport enough that they would trust me, how to be excited about what I was talking to them about. I really learned that I needed to work for companies where I was passionate about the product. And so just cool. Kind of learned, what was important to me, and then what were my strengths. And so did really well there. But there, a lot of times when folks are working for education-based companies, you'll find that income may not be as great as it would be at tech organizations or software organizations. So I left there I got a year under my belt, got a year of success, and then I had a connection at a B2B data software company. That's actually where I met Evan Welchel, where I met Matt Malcolm. And
that's where it all comes.
Yep, exactly. And those are good connections that I made. So I became the SDR. At that time, it was just me, soon after Matt joined. But I was the SDR for a smaller pod of AEs, and I got to work really closely with the CMO there, who was super great at bringing me alongside her, helping me with copy, helping me understand even just things in my signature that would be beneficial for me to tweak. I got to work really tightly with the AE, so I learned alignment really well and what that looks like, and just how powerful it can be when you're aligned with both sales and marketing so closely. So again, just saw a lot of success, learned a ton, learned how to test strategies, learned about how important data is. I really liked what I was doing because I think it set me up for success in all of my roles, because there I kind of learned about the buyer's journey. I learned about how leads come into the system. I learned about data enrichment. I learned about all of these things that are really important when you're working with an SDR org, and I can go into those later. But it was just a really great place when you're working in marketing at a marketing company, centered company, to work as an SDR, and you learn a ton of needed information. So anywho, was successful there, and then went on. Evan actually told me I should check out this competitor company. And so
Evan
I
told
did.
You to apply for your competitor. That's funny.
He did. He just told, he was like, hey, well, he saw things that were strengths of mine, and he just really felt like, hey, you could really get somewhere at this other company that he believed in. And so I went there. That's when he started being a mentor to me. I got to shout out Evan. That was his first mentorship to me. So I went there, applied, got hired on. And at that company, what I learned was that, and I think this is a lot of where my passion comes from. The team that I got hired onto in the SDR org was the enterprise team. And
Yeah.
they were kind of left to figure it out for themselves. It almost felt like they were, I said this to the organization as I was there, like they were the basement members of the team, just kind of do what you're supposed to do, but you're not really given any guidance. You're not taught how to be successful. And everybody was just trying things, and they weren't really doing it from a data-driven approach either. So they were trying things, just kind of hoping that those things would land. Nothing was really streamlined for them. Alignment wasn't good at all. So basically what my previous companies allowed me to do was like bring that background, and for myself to start scoping how I was going to do my job there, since they did offer the freedom for you to figure it out yourself. I basically took what my learning was, put it into something that was scalable for me. And I started just driving a lot of success. And because I was successful when there wasn't others successful, a lot of the teams started coming to me for help. And a lot of the AEs started saying, go figure out what Mona's doing, and then do what Mona's doing. And so that was
this is
great.
for the competitor. So it's like Evan. Okay, gotcha. So this is job number 3. Okay.
This is job number 3. Yep. And so that was great. Had a lot of folks coming to me. And then that helped me realize that I had this passion, and I got this, I guess you can call it a high, from helping other people. I just really liked sharing what I was doing. If others could follow it, and it could make them successful too, or if they could see success, that gave me a lot of joy in my work. And so as I was doing that, I kind of talked to my manager about possibly becoming a team lead. And this was about a year later that I asked to be a team lead. As I was looking for some career progression. And he basically told me, he was like, we don't have that position available. And he was like, and I don't think we're going to make that position available. And he said, and Mona, frankly, I don't think that it could be successful anyway. He said, I think you're a unicorn. I think what you do is something that you do only because you're uniquely wired to do it. And I don't think you can teach what you do to other people. And it seemed like a compliment, but to me, it really made me sad, because I was like, I know that I can teach what I'm doing. I know I can get people to see what I'm doing and then be able to do it. And I see that some of them are already having success with that. But at the time, it was kind of it was a moment for me where I was like, hey, what am I going to do with this? And what I had to do with it was really evaluate that it didn't seem like there was any place for me to move to at that organization. They had just gotten a VP of sales who had started maybe a quarter before I was starting to feel like I'm going to need to head out of here. Like, this is going to be a dead end for me if I don't have somebody that believes in developing me and is offering me any kind of line of sight to my next step here. I started during that time, is like, you don't just jump into another position when you start feeling that way. I will say that too. I still leveraged that time to grow. And one of the things that I did to grow was I started attending more events. And so there was more people in the company that were based in San Francisco who also started being around me. And one of them was that VP of sales, who now is a really good friend of mine. She became a mentor for me at the org. But it was kind of a little bit too late, because by the time her and I started having this connection, and she started kind of growing me, I had a really big company reach out to me about a marketing position at this startup that they were starting. So it was Map My Fitness, which got acquired by Under Armour. And so they wanted me to come be a marketing manager on their this digital area segment group. And so anyway, because it was a manager position, I was like, heck yeah, like that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that growth. And this company is believing it. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, awesome. How can I not go for this opportunity? So I did leave. I took that opportunity, but quickly realized as I was there that I was really missing the specific SDR space that I was really missing just being amongst a team. I was kind of a lone wolf there. And so what ended up happening was in that first quarter of me being in that new role, the company that I was at let go of my previous manager. And so now they have no SDR manager. And all the AEs were like, can somebody please bring back Mona because their pipeline is dropping. And so the VP of sales, who I'd just started getting to know, basically reached out to me and was like, hey, everybody wants you back. And I know that you were at SDR level, but how would you feel like about coming back as the SDR manager? And I was
That's
blown
awesome.
away. Yeah, because I
Wow.
was just asking for a team lead position. And so she said, I believe you can do this, and I will be here to mentor you, and I'll walk alongside of you, and you will not fail, you know? And so she just gave me this confidence. She said that she was going to, you know, invest in my growth while I was in the role. And so I went back and I became an SDR manager at that company, which I never wanted to leave. I really enjoyed working there. It was just about this growth opportunity that wasn't available. That was really the deciding factor in me leaving. So I got to go back and work at the place that I wanted to be at, be in the role that I wanted to be at, got the mentor that I really craved. And we got to see a ton of success in the 2.5 years that I was in that role.
That's really amazing. So I think I was counting the entire time, but it was 4 hops until you were an SDR manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
So started
Yep.
out in sales, SDR, SDR for another place, marketing manager, finally SDR
Mm-hmm.
manager.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
One thing that I guess like really sticks out to me about your story is one, the power of personal loyalty. And also another thing about like how important long-term relationships are. I noticed that
Mm-hmm.
like even in my friends that are in sales, they typically hop from one place to another in a year into a year and a half. But like you and Matt and Evan took those relationships and now y'all are still literally working together. So and I see that all the time. I was a part of a,
Yeah, I was going to
uh,
say, even to add on to that, Evan, Matt, and I would hop on calls all the time in the different positions that we were in at the different organizations, and we would share like what we were doing. So we'd open up our screen and, hey, this is what I've started trying. You know, we're leveraging this tool now. It's working this way. It's really great. So we stayed connected, not just at a friend level, but even about our craft, you know, and just kept encouraging each other. We all really enjoyed like just the creativity that comes with the SDR role. And so
yeah.
it was a passion button of ours to just get on and just talk about where we're at, what we're doing, what we're seeing drive results and new tech in the space and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks for sharing your story with me up until being an SDR manager. I'm really interested in hearing more about like how that transition was for you. So you have this great mentor. She obviously has gone through from one level to the next and now she's a VP, but
Mm-hmm.
talk to me about that process of like, all right, you know, I think that one of the main challenges is like now you have to manage your previous peers, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
probably a little bit of a challenge. You know, learning about like how compensation and how to have like those crucial conversations and things like that. But talk to me about how the growth journey was for you once you were in that manager seat, and also some of the things that you were doing until you're now in the position that you're in today. So like you talked about metrics, you talked about you know, leveraging relationships and mentorship and stuff like that. But how
Mm-hmm.
did you level up from like a beginner manager to, you know, who you are today?
That's a really good question. I think that making the shift to manage my like peers was actually probably a little bit easier for me because I think because of my age, they always saw me as a little bit different from them. You know, the work ethic that I was bringing to the table was a little bit different than theirs, in large part because they were young and there was no manager in our Austin office. And so that's
Yeah.
really hard when you don't have anybody. There's really nobody driving any results from you or driving any activity metrics, and you're just left on your own to do it. And you've got all these fun people and you've got this full kitchen and you've got games in the office. Like, who wouldn't want to, you know, like they're making good salaries based on what they were expecting outside of college and all of this good stuff. Whereas I had a different mindset. You know, my mindset was like, I have some catch up work to do. You know, I've got to I've got to
that was
get.
my mentality too. When I switched to technology, like
Mhm.
I was behind in everyone, so I had to work like Saturday mornings and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I did. I felt behind. I felt a lot of just accountability to make it work because it hadn't worked in so long. There hadn't been something that was successfully being done there. And so I just really, really desperately wanted to make sure that pipeline was never something somebody could point to at our organization and say, that's the problem. Um,
Wow.
so that was really key to me. I had a lot of friends in the marketing org and in the sales org. And I wanted to make sure they had what they needed, that everything was being done with what they were generating. And then for sales, that they were being set up to succeed based on pipeline. So I think my peers, it was like oh yeah, of course Mona should be the manager. And there wasn't this look at me of, now what do you do? Who are you to start telling me like to do specific things? They kind of already, they came more with an attitude of, okay, tell us what to do. Like we can do it. Just give us what's the script? What do you want us to do? What do you want us to say? How should we do it? So in that aspect, it was really good. And then I think there's a part of my management that's also we're in this together. Like as much as I'm your manager, I'm also your teammate. I still carry that with me today. When I talk to, my team, it's all about, I'm working alongside of you. I'm so proud to work alongside of you. I'm honored to work alongside of you. It's not, I'm honored to lead you. I feel like we're all getting our hands dirty in our hard work together. And so I think they felt that from me as well. As far as up leveling manager skills, I think the key for me, and this was really pivotal at that organization, it was something that was a big value of theirs, was women in leadership. And I
Mm.
had just some strong women in leadership that believed in pouring into the next generation of female leaders. And so they gave me a seat at the table. They would constantly bring me into the executive meetings that they were having, whether it was the CMO, the VP of sales, director of demand gen, all of those things. They really just brought me in and helped me to understand more than my little siloed area. The underpinnings, the speaking engagements, things like that. They really encouraged me to take those extra steps to up level my leadership. They talked to me about, how I should conduct one-on-ones. They talked to me about how I should have hard, difficult conversations. They at QBRs, they would bring me up and they would have me speak to what we were doing and my results. So they definitely allowed me to own my business and then speak to my business. So those are all kind of things that equipped me to grow more confident in my role.
Yeah, thanks for answering. All right, now let's shift things a little bit over to the SDRs that may be thinking about eventually growing and becoming either an SDR manager here or a team lead, or people that fall into that category. So can you I hesitate to use like the analogy, but like drop the veil a little bit and let us know like what is life on the other side of the fence in management? So we obviously see like the meetings that y'all lead, we see what your calendars look like, but I imagine that there's probably a couple of things that would actually surprise SDRs about like what managers actually do. Can you talk to me about the day-to-day?
Yeah, and I think the day-to-day shifts based on needs a lot. And so you really have to, as a manager, make sure you understand how to prioritize. And you're always kind of looking at, okay, that you have a good handle on what's needed today, and then what am I going to need to start planning for a month from now? And so, and I'll say this way, like for small business, for instance, in this role, I'm constantly looking at making sure that they have everything that they need so that we drive our results for this month. But I'm also always thinking about, okay, say leads got taken away this month. Do we have something in place that's going to help us get to our goal for the next month? How can we start creating that strategy? Even if that strategy is not necessarily needed now, I want it kind of out on the back burner. I want it to have been thought about. I want us to have prepared for it. I want us to be trying things that we may not necessarily need, but by the time we need to try them, we at least have some data on what works and what doesn't work, so that we have the
Cool.
best solution to go with. And so that's always something that's kind of on my mind. But day to day, I'm thinking about how to motivate, inspire, encourage my team. I do that's a big part of a strength of mine, or an area that I think is needed, especially in the SDR position. It can get super mundane, and a large part of driving results and having people be happy in their role is making sure that you're bringing fun into the equation, that you're bringing inspiration into the equation, you're bringing energy, that you're also transparent with them. So it's not always about just highlighting the good. It's also about saying, where do we need to improve? It's about saying, hey, I understand where you might be at, because frankly, I'm there today. It's Monday and I've got to get focused. And so come get focused with me. Like, what can we do to get focused? So there's a good bit of where I'm thinking about, how do I be transparent, but also help them shape an attitude that's going to help them and not hurt them. So anyway, that's something that I spend a lot of time doing. I'm consistently looking at data to see what we're doing and whether we need to be doing more of that or whether we need to be doing less of that. How can we tweak something to make it stronger? I'm looking at making sure that they have what they need to actually be successful in that job, whether that's lead flow, whether that's the right sequencing, the right messaging, whether that's the right calls to action in the messaging. Are they including the right resources? Do we need to update those? So there's something that people grab hold of more. And then there's just like, hey, if I'm going to ask them to do something, I want to make sure that I've thought it through, that I've done some of the heavy lifting for them, and that they can kind of do more of the massaging of it, tweaking it to make it the best that it can be. But I've kind of given them the bulk of, here's what I want you to start. Here's where I want you to start from. Now, put your spin on it, add your flavor, add your spice, make this better. That's a lot easier for them to do than having to build the whole thing themselves. So I try to do a lot of that as well. There are meetings. Meetings do take up a good portion of your time. So it's, how do I make sure that, how can I do some of that asynchronously? So which meetings do I need to look at the agenda for and then opt out of going? Which ones do I need to be there for, but what work can I be doing in the background when something doesn't pertain to me? There's a lot of being available to your team. I get asked questions a lot. And so it's not even about me answering all of those questions, but it's about me knowing who to direct them to sometimes, or saying, hey, I'll take this one off your plate. You continue moving on, leave this one to me. I'll circle back with you when I have an answer. But just know that I've got the ball. So there's a lot of that as a manager. What else am I missing out? Let me look. I added some notes. Alignment with marketing and sales counterparts is a big one. So there's a lot of times where I'm meeting with our marketing team and we're just looking at, hey, what did the follow-up for these events look like? And did we capture everything that you sent? Have we done well with what you gave us? Here's the update from my end. Is there something that we should do with these going forward for the next event? So it's a lot of kind of reviewing and then making a plan for the next event or the next campaign.
Gotcha.
So same thing with sales. It's talking to people in the sales org, looking at our account planning docs. Why are we going after these specific accounts? Is there something that we could do better here? Do we have the right data for these accounts? All of that good stuff. Onboarding new members, some of those things are kind of typical. And then just making sure SDR expectations are being met. And if they're not being met, if I see that we're lower on dials, it's not about, cracking any whip and getting them to get to those dials. It's about figuring out what's holding them back, and sometimes there's something that I need to remove from their plate in order for them to be able to have that focus. And sometimes it's about shifting my expectations and figuring out a new way for them to get to the desired goal, but in a way that maybe is unique or just fresh or is showing empathy for what they're already currently doing. So.
Yeah, I try to do that too with all the homework that I assign. It's like, hey, I remember being on the other side of the fence and being asked to do all the enablement.
Totally. Yep.
This is actually a really fascinating answer for me. Thanks for sharing all of that. I actually have a couple of specific questions. So just on a percentage basis, like I think that one of the things that I really hear, just to summarize, making sure that my team has what they need. That's really important, whether it's from marketing, whether it's from, thinking about pipeline generation, leads, stuff like that. And then the other big thing that you mentioned was making sure that my team was motivated and engaged. So like that's something that's really, really, really interesting to me. What percentage of your energy goes into that, would you say? Like,
Mm.
you know, is that like priority? Because like we've all had a manager before where it's like that was priority number 6, right? And then they had a lot of turnover. We've also had managers that like that's like something that's like super, super important, right? So I'm curious as to like what priority that is, how much like in a given week, how much of your energy goes into that, and what do you think the payout for that is for an organization?
Mm. Well, percentage wise, some of it I do naturally, and so it it's kind of just fluid and it's there in the back, it's running all the time. I'm thinking kind of along those lines. But I would say, gosh, I would say if I was looking at all of my priorities on things that are super important that I'm bringing to this team, I would say that's probably my number 2.
And
And
number
I
one is pipeline generation, like
my
making
number
sure that
1 is making sure that they're, and so I want to make this generalized, that they're equipped with what they need. So whether that's the leads are in their box, like that's a lot of times here we still have trouble with that, just making sure that they can see what is the best things for them to follow up on, you know.
yeah,
Next thing is just making sure that they have the messaging baked out, so all those things are in the number 1 for me. Like, have I made sure that they have everything that they need, just that they're seeing the right things, that they're not having to go out and fish for it for themselves, and then I have everybody distracted on those kinds of things. I want them to come in and know that, hey, Mona's going to have made sure that we have what we need to do our role for the day, for the month, you know, for the quarter, etc. So that's my number 1. And number 2 to that, and it's a very close to, is making sure that I'm coming alongside and I'm helping energize their work, because
yeah,
it is such a taxing role. So,
yeah. I I love your answer. Um, and I think that it's a very empathetic approach as someone who has been in that role for a long time, that like for you to actually have an answer like that. So thanks for sharing about that. Uh, the other question I have is, all right, so I've always been, I'm curious that, okay, so like I'm trying to phrase this the right way. I have all these meetings in my calendar, and then I never want to have a meeting for just having a meeting's sake. That's a waste of my time. That's a waste of everyone else's time, right? So it's like
mm,
before I have a meeting, I actually like mentally visualize like what, like if I got X, Y, and Z out of this meeting, then it's a successful meeting. And then now, you know, this helps out my business, this helps my team, whatever, et cetera, right? So it's like I'm really curious as to what objectives you have for a one-on-one. So obviously some of it is just check-in, some of it's, I'm curious as to like, before you have one-on-ones, like, do you have like that sort of mental visualization type of thing where it's like, what am I trying to get out of this? Or is it more a general check-in, or like, I'm curious as
mm,
to just like, could you just shed me some, like, what are your objectives for one-on-ones?
that's good. Yeah, some of it is just a level set that we're both looking at things the same. So it's to, especially in an, you know, an all remote
Interesting.
organization, it's to have that connection point where, like, hey, have I been seeing your world the way you see your world? And tell me what's been on your plate. Tell me what you've been focused on, you know, and is that what I thought that you were focused on, or did I have no idea that you were focused on that, you know? And so I would say that some of it is just to make sure that we're in lockstep. One of my second objectives is to make it to where it's an environment to where if they're behind in this particular area, or if there's something that's been tripping them up or taking them way too much time, that they're able to bring that up to me, that I can uncover that in that meeting and say, please give that to me so that I can help you with that. So we actually look for those places. Like, it's not going to, you don't have to come to a one-on-one and worry about, oh man, I haven't gotten to my inquiry view. You know, that's hopefully something that I'm bringing up to you and saying, hey, let's try this. Have you, when's the last time that you got into this? Is there something that I can do to help narrow that view for you so that we can at least prioritize X, Y, and Z? If we get that done, then that's success, you know? And so we're constantly looking at what's one more thing that we can do that's going to drive success for you. What's something that you can implement 2 days from now? And at the end of the week, we'll be like, when? So figuring out a plan for another when is part of my one-on-ones, I would say. And then just making sure that there's a touch point for them to be able to bring up anything that's on their mind as a concern or a point of need or anything like that.
I think that that's really interesting because I've had one-on-ones where they're all about like, I've had one-on-ones where it's like, tell me about your life, tell me about how's things, like, and it's almost like a coffee chat. Not here. I mean, like in previous jobs, it's like I have one-on-ones that are very conversational, and then I have one-on-ones that are very problem-oriented. So I do think that there's like a spectrum of one-on-ones. But thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, we try to do just to give a little more clarity to that. So we have our one-on-ones biweekly on my team, and then the other weeks we have a 15-minute check-in. And that 15-minute check-in is more of the, hey,
For the
like,
problem setting.
The 15-minute check-in is more of a, we may not have anything that we need to really touch base on. So let's just let's just be able to dive in a little bit more of like, how are you doing? What's going on personally? Have that kind of chat. But then it is also, is there anything I can do for you? But it's not going to dive as deep as the one-on-one.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, now that I understand, this was actually super enlightening for me. It was really good to hear your story and, about your role. All right. So we talked about all these different things, right? Having one-on-ones, thinking strategically, solving problems. And I guess like in my own personal career experience, like there were certain jobs where it's just sort of like, I knew that this wasn't a good fit for my personality, right? So that's why whenever I advise like high school students and stuff like that, I tell them you should take a personality test because it could potentially save you tons of money by you studying something in college for 4 years that you're not going to use. So tell me about like, all right, so you've been in this space for a long time. What sort of people do you think, like you have 7 people on your team, the type of people, like the 1 or 2 people that like in your one-on-ones, you might start to think like, and start pitching like, hey, you should think about management, So like, what do you look for in potential future managers, and what sort of like characteristics would make, so I guess like it's just sort of, what personality fit would be like great for an SDR manager? That was a little convoluted. But I think you get the question.
Yeah. I think one thing that I would say that I think particularly stands out is when somebody's not looking for a solution just because it's their problem. Like they're looking for a solution because they understand it can affect this many people. Like, hey, I think if we made this change, it's not about if we made this change, then I'm going to XYZ. But the changes they actually bring up are because they're seeing that there's more people involved, or that it's going to go far beyond even them just being in the role. It can actually impact the SDR org as a whole. And so that always is a big indicator to me that this person isn't just about hitting their number. They're about more people hitting their number. They're about the team hitting their number. So yeah, just their concerns are more about a team dynamic or a team success factor or anything like that, rather than just their individual. And it's not that they can't have both, like they can care about themselves individually, but they raise concerns that they see could potentially have impact for more people than just them. So that's something that I think stands out to me as somebody who would make for a good team manager. I also think people that enjoy developing others, growing others, championing others. When you're an SDR manager, you really should kind of have the mindset of, okay, we're going to try something. You and me, like if I had somebody on my team, say Bruno, you and me, we're going to try something. We're going to try this strategy. If it fails, it was my deal. Like it failed. I had the idea, Bruno just executed it on. I should have thought about X, Y, and Z. If it's successful, Bruno had this great idea. He brought it to the table and he implemented it and blah, blah, blah. He gets all the credit for it being a great deal. If it wasn't, or a great idea, if it didn't work out, I'm taking the heat on, this was an experiment that I tried. And thankfully Bruno helped me try it, but we figured out that it wasn't successful and we're going back to the drawing table, and actually awesome. Bruno has some great ideas of how we can change this so it can actually be more effective, and it's all about elevating your team members rather than you trying to take that those accolades. So anyway, so I would say a person that's kind of wired more that way, that enjoys really just bragging on their team, you know, and really lifting them up as the hero, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that are doing a lot of the executing, you know, and they are the ones that are out there. I want to say hitting the streets, but they're not on the streets anymore. So, but they're on the phones, they're sending the emails, and they've got the bag that they're carrying and all that good stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's, I would say, someone who is okay not being in the spotlight, but rather putting the spotlight on their team when it's good spotlight. I would say those people who can give clear, honest, helpful feedback in a way that helps others to actually take action on it. So don't just give feedback and then not have practical ways that you can implement it. Say and you're not worried about doing that. You know that you can communicate it in a way that is going to be effective, in a way that's going to be motivating, in a way that's you're going to have built up enough relational equity for them to know that you're on their side, you know, that you actually really care about them. And that's the reason why you're giving this feedback. So I think that's super important as an SDR manager. So if you find yourself having some of those strengths, I think those are pretty good indicators that you're going to be a good SDR manager.
I really like your answer in terms of, I mean, to put a label on it, one of the things that you described is really just servant leadership, right? I mean, that's ultimately what you're describing. I also think that what's interesting about your answer is that you listed 3 things, and 2 of them are about values and heart posture, and only 1 is a skill. The skill that you mentioned was about creating accountability and, like, you know, giving constructive feedback. But the first 2 that you mentioned is just like about, like, you know, what people actually value. I think that's really interesting. So I guess, like, I wonder if that just means that, like, this is something that, well, I guess it's like this. It's like being in conducting a bunch of sales interviews and stuff like that, right? And it's like, oh, did he have good presence? You know, like, you know, how was his communication skills? It's very much like almost like qualitative, as opposed to like asking the deeper-seated questions about, like, you know, what's your motivations, you know. But what were you saying?
Yeah, and I think there are definitely skill sets that are going to set you up for more success. I just think if you don't have these baseline passions, you can do those things. I don't think you'll likely be as successful for as long. And maybe that's your goal. Maybe your goal isn't to be an SDR manager for long. Maybe it's just to drive success for 12 months in hopes that you're going to go to this other thing, you know? But as somebody who really is seeking to be an SDR manager and thinks that this could be a passion for us, I would say that if you have these in place, then you're likely on the right track. Are there other things that you should be doing? Like really learning our tools, like learning how to make the most out of outreach and Salesforce, and understanding the, you know, whole buyer journey, and understanding personas and understanding copy and all those kind of things. Yes, those will absolutely help you, and you'll have things that you can give your team and to help equip them, which will earn respect and all of that good stuff, which will help with feedback. So all of those are there as well. But I would say there's a lot of people that are really good at creating reports, or who are really good at, you know, certain logistical skills that you need as an SDR manager. And then they become an SDR manager and they don't ever earn the heart of their team. And in fact, they lose the heart of their team, you know? And that doesn't matter how many skills you have. Like, once you have lost their heart, you haven't earned their respect, they don't believe you're for them. It's just really hard for them to actually go out there and do their job. So
number 1 reason why people leave is because they don't like their manager. That's what research shows. All right, I appreciate you, you know, taking this call today. Wrapping things home, tell me more about the career trajectory, right? So it's just sort of like, some people have ambitions, they have goals, and it's important to understand, like, all right, if I want to get to C, then I need to go A to B to C, right? So it's like, tell me about talk to me about, like, the career trajectory from SDR to SDR manager, and then what that leads to eventually. That's a multi-part question. So why don't we just start with, like, if I'm an SDR in this organization and I want to become an SDR manager, then what would I do to like, prepare myself and, make it so that that move makes sense. So it's like when you moved into your first SDR manager role, it was just like an obvious decision, right? So it's like, what would you tell to an SDR who is considering management here?
Yeah. So I think I would probably more along the lines of sometimes it's not linear, right? Sometimes it's not, it's
Yeah.
not just a, hey, this path, and to not despise that, like, or to not let that freak you out. I feel like when you're doing your job really well and you're learning to be a master of your craft, there's a guy named Ralph Barcy. That's one of the things he told me when I was in the SDR position. I was really frustrated with there not being a team lead position. He was like, hey, let me get your mind on something else. He was just like, Mona, use this time to master your craft and things will work out. And so that's what I went back to the drawing table for. And then that opportunity presented itself to go be a marketing manager somewhere else. But anywho, a door eventually opened for me to be an SDR manager. And I believe that even if didn't mean to name companies, even if that last company didn't bring me back as an SDR manager, it would have opened up somewhere else. And I would have known I can do this role because I was mastering where I was at and I was learning valuable skills. So even if you don't go from SDR right to SDR team lead, right to SDR manager, if you're doing things that are shaping you for some of those skill sets that are needed in the SDR manager role, you are on the track. Like you are on the path. You may not know yet how it all fits together, but just continue mastering where you're at. Those things are going to be leveraged when you get into that position one way or the other. So that might not be like the answer that people are looking for, but I found that's the answer for me. And frankly, I love my story and I love the things that I got out of, kind of going along that way. And it helped just with mindset. And so I don't know that it's going to necessarily be linear.
Yeah. So some people do have like, all right, so it's like thanks for that answer. So like part B to what I was asking when I asked like 5 parts of the same question. So it's like if someone were trying to become a SAL here, strategic account leader, then they probably are going to join SMB, then someone leaves commercial and then they go to commercial and then finally they said it's like if I want to become a basketball player and I want to make the major leagues, then I do really good in high school, then I play in college and I do really good there, and then so it's like A leads to B leads to C. So tell me about so if someone gets into the SDR management position, then what sort of opportunities does that lead to as well?
Oh gosh, well I think most SDR managers are looking to go manager, senior manager, and whatever kind of role that is. And usually after that to director of SDR management, where they're managing managers of other SDR teams. Some of them end up wanting to go from SDR manager. Some people go from SDR manager to closing roles. Like frankly, they're kind of like, man, I want to go back to an individual contributor role after managing a team. Sometimes they want a break from managing and they just want to go back to driving their own results. And then they go from that to sales manager positions, if they haven't already had that skill set underneath their belt. So I think that you're either going to go SDR manager, senior manager, director, or you're going to end up, that's likely the path, or you're going to end up someone like me who's like, I actually just love managing SDRs. And that's where I'm at right now. And I continue to say my story is probably not the norm, but it's the same way with when I was an SDR, everybody would say, you need to go into sales. You should be closing. You can make a ton more money, all of this good stuff. But I really enjoy the SDR craft. And so I knew that I'm staying in the SDR org. For me, this isn't a stepping stone. And I feel that way now about the SDR manager role. This is where I thrive. This is something, if I'm going to be out there working every day, this is an area that I can find passion in and believe in and find value and joy in. So not everybody is on a path to continue to somewhere else necessarily.
Cool. Well, that's super helpful. Now here's the favorite part of the podcast. You can give, if you want to, you can give a few shout outs to whoever you want.
Oh, really?
So, and it will be forever immortalized into YouTube. So, and then
Oh man, I've got so many shout outs to give. I mean, I think one of my biggest shout outs is thank you to Evan for even bringing me along to this place. He's the one that referred me over to GitLab. He knew that it was exactly like the kind of organization that I was looking for, just matched what I want, my balance of family and work. He knew that the new challenge of working inbound was going to be something that I would thrive in, because historically I had been only outbound focused. And so this was a new challenge, and he was like, Mona, I think you're going to enjoy the challenge. And I have. It's been awesome. And it's just super nice to work with someone who's not just been a mentor to me, but who's also a friend and who also really knows what he's doing. So I trust his leadership. So that's great for me. Really thankful for Hannah B. It's awesome to work with a female leader again. She's just, yeah, she's awesome. She has the same servant style leadership where she's like, hey, toss over what you shouldn't be focused on. If there's something that's a bottleneck for you, I want to hear about it. And I really appreciate that from her. I know that she's my go-to person for any challenges that I'm facing. I know that she's able to listen to concerns that I have, all of that good stuff. So there's a lot of trust built in that relationship. So super appreciate her. And I just super appreciate my team of peers. We're a collaborative group. You're a part of that. I think everybody is willing to pitch in, to help, to share what they're doing that's working. So that's awesome. And then my team hustles every single day. They come ready to to try new things, to give input on what's working, what's not working, to help each other out, to believe the best about each other. They're definitely, I call them a dream team. They're my dream team. So I super appreciate the way that we work together, all focused on the same goal, all feeling like we're just as engaged as each other, all holding each other to a really high bar, and having a ton of fun along the way. So
cool.
Yeah, those are my shout outs.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ramona Elliott.
If you didn't get shouted out, it's not because I don't love you. Oh, thanks everybody. Thanks, Chris. You're awesome.
Yeah. All right. Take care. See you, everyone.